Hello and welcome to the Ashcan Edition on Graphic Policy TV. I'm Brant Lewis. And tonight, join me as we go to a piano bar where a wonderful musician is playing. Granted, I'm not on stage because they can't play an instrument, but maybe they can let me play the triangle or deal with the bar back. Tonight, we're here to see Kody Okamoto and discuss their work with Keep It Time, which is a great sad boys and music, queer rock and roll slice of life webcomic. Kody, thanks so much for joining me. How are you doing today?
Great, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Always love enthusiasm, and especially as I kind of found out, the people that I'm interested to talk with usually have the best conversation, so I think this should go well.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
Mhm. So to kind of kick things off, let's start off with a couple of warm-up questions. So if you were trapped on a deserted island and you could only bring one music album with you, what
Oh
would it
no.
be and why?
Uh I'm gonna go gut reaction. I think Hopalong's Painted Shut, which is indie rock album. Uh I have listened to that album on repeat a lot, and I've yet to get sick of it, so I would put money on I might hopefully never get sick of it.
That's a good choice. I'm glad because I think you may be the first person that's actually put happy music as that.
Yeah, I feel like, I love sad music, but I think eventually I'd want something if I'm stuck on the island with only that to keep me company. A little more upbeat.
Mhm. So, what's a comic, manga, or webcomic that you feel that people have really slept on?
Ooh. Um I have really been enjoying U Town by Cab, and I believe it was a webcomic. It finished its run, and I believe it just came out in print with, I want to say, Oni Press, and if it's not Oni Press, it's Dark Horse, but it's one of those two. And I don't see too many people talking about it, and I think it's phenomenal. It's about like punks and alternative like kids. I say kids, but they're young adults, and the gentrification of their neighborhood and just how they're dealing with it as they come of age. And it's fantastic. Cab's art's amazing.
Nice. It definitely sounds like a comic that I'm into and also share similar DNA with your work as well.
Yeah, and I for sure, like, I get super inspired looking at Cab's like environments, and they ink everything traditionally, which is even cooler.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, what's the first comic they remember reading and really making an impact on you?
I first comic was probably Garfield, but I don't say that it has too much of an impact on me. I think I just it was sort of background in my life. So Calvin and Hobbes, I think, would be my first comic that I like actively sought out, set aside time to read, um, and I got my hands on like the volumes of Calvin and Hobbes are all really like extra long and they don't fit on the bookshelf. But my pride and joy was the 10th anniversary one, which was like the most special of all of those really long volumes because it had like commentary from Bill Watterson and like some of his insights into the comic creation process. And I feel like that's probably what got me interested in like, wow, comics, a career.
No, that's really cool. And I think that's a very interesting thing that I've been noticing with my interviews is that a lot of people talk about how the comic strips and the newspaper have been a major influence. I know for me personally, those were some of the first comics I read.
Yeah. Yeah, like they're just really accessible to us as kids, I think, back in the day, in a way that maybe like floppy superhero comics weren't quite because we didn't have money.
Exactly. And I'm about to ask you a very hard, difficult question, maybe a bit polarizing. What is the ultimate music for sad boys?
Uh, I'm gonna do the thing again. Gut reaction. It's gotta be emo, right? But like I say that, but I really like the 90s indie rock version of sad boy music, like Built to Spill and the lemon heads. So that maybe I'll change my answer. That'll be my answer.
That's good. I think for me, probably Joy Division. It's that
Yeah.
80s. Because it's Joy Division or Nine Inch Nails. And I'm just saying that because as fan of both those sad boys.
You know what's funny is that I had never listened to Joy Division, and so my first introduction to Joy Division was a song called "Let's Dance to Joy Division" by the Wombats.
Yes, I know that one.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
So like, that's all I knew about Joy Division for a long time. I was like, oh, they must be a happy band because the song's about dancing to them.
Yeah, a very happy band with a very cheerful song called Level Terrace Apart.
Yeah.
Perfect. No notes. So, kind of digging now into keeping time, let's talk a little bit about the origins of the project because I find it really interesting because I believe this is your first major ongoing work, isn't it?
My first major like solo project.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that is definitely true. Yeah, but prior to this, I was just like doing comics as the artist. Like I would team up with a writer, do some stories, and I really didn't do that much. I did like a couple, like maybe two. And by the time I was done with my second one, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to like do my own thing, like completely on my own. But yeah, keeping time started because I've had these characters for forever. Like they've been like they've been stuffed animals, then they turned into human characters. They've been like roleplay characters. I wrote short stories about them. Um, they've lived like very many different iterations over the years, and then so I'm finally settling down with like, okay, if I'm gonna like start to finish tell the story, how's it gonna go? And that's pretty much how it got started.
Oh, wow. That is very fascinating, that evolution of it's going from stuffed animals to this. I don't want to say it's not depressing. It's a very sad, emotional comic about these two people trying to find connection through music.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty funny. Like, the one of the main characters, it was just like I distinctly remember the toy line. It was called Puppy Puppy Puppies, which was a partner toy line to something called Kitty Kitty Kitties. And like the kitty dolls, they had like a marble in their head, so if you shook them, it would make a purring sound. The puppies didn't have any gimmick. They might have had like a squeaky, like squeaker in them. But yep, from that to whatever is going on at Keeping Time.
That is super fascinating. And I gotta ask, were you a musician? Do you have any experience with music?
I like picked up a guitar in high school because all my friends could play music, like instruments. Like my the people I dated in high school were like drummers and bassists, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna play something. But I never got past barring the F chord on the guitar, so that is where I stopped. So not really. Like I can't read music. I can read guitar tabs. I doesn't mean I can play them. Um, I could play like little tiny a couple bars here and there on the piano, and that was just by muscle memory. Like I had like I someone gifted me a electronic keyboard, and I had to like take a Sharpie and write down what note was what key. So no, I'm really not musically inclined whatsoever.
I totally understand that. I grew up lovingly encouraged by my family to play violin, and I decided, yeah, I'm gonna try guitar. Did not last a couple weeks because I made the mistake of going acoustic, which is really painful on the fingers.
Yeah, I mean that's all I could play, and I agree.
Mhm.
I never got to build up the calluses.
So, how did that music aspect angle really come through for the series?
I feel like I just really love music, and it's always been an influence on me. Like I feel like I'm that kind of person that like puts on an album and like it puts you into the mood like of the album, and so that influences me creatively. Um, and it's something like I just it's always been a huge part of my life, so it feels natural to kind of incorporate it into a story, even though like it means I have to do so much research as someone who doesn't know anything. Like, I'm so afraid of like drawing, I don't know, a guitar pedal, and then like an actual guitarist is going to be like, you would never use that pedal with that guitar like that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I like it definitely puts a like fire under my butt of trying to get things right.
But I imagine that also has to be fun too, because it's really expanding your own knowledge and experience with these subjects, but that's kind of pushing you a bit out of your shell.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely like, I don't know, if I only drew what I knew, I guess I would just be drawing other people drawing. So that would be really boring. So it's really fun to kind of get into like get really granular with the research.
So I do think it's very interesting that, say, and I feel old for saying quote unquote period piece with it taking place in the 2000s. So what was kind of that decision of dialing back the time to that period?
I feel like the 2000s, like that stretch of like 2004 to 2008 stands out in my memory as the most clearly. I think it must be because that's when I was going through high school and I was coming of age, but like everything just felt really like vibrant, and the little MP3 players of the era, like they felt so important to me. And so I think it's just me like being nostalgic for it. I saw someone else doing like a similar thing where they were kind of doing a story set around the same years, and they used a really cool word that they coined called retrospeculative, because they're not concerned with getting every single detail right. They're more about getting like the vibe of the era, how they experienced it, right. And that's more, I was like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's more of what I'm trying to do.
I think that's a great term. I will definitely keep that in my back pocket because I think a lot of Cuban Time is about the vibes, whether it be through friends, potential romantic relationships, or even just life itself. Because I think it's just very interesting to find that with the main character of Daniel, who's just basically kind of going through life, not really knowing what he wants, and almost the way that he can move on is by going back to his past by
Mhm.
joining the band with Denver.
Yeah, like I I don't know. It's just I hope that it like for people who lived through the era, I hope that they like get something out of it. Like they see something and it reminds me of something that they felt. Maybe not so much like an exact place that they've been, but like since it's set in Chicago and I'm like trying to do Chicago justice, but also I'm trying to like not tie myself down too concretely to Chicago for the same reason as I don't want to mess up a guitar pedal. I don't want Chicagoan to be like, you can't get from that street to that neighborhood in that time. Like, come on. But like I get that instinct because anytime I see something set in like Hawaii, which is my home state, and I see them do something ridiculous like cross an island in no time flat, I'm just like, but yeah, so I hope mostly that I'm like just trying to capture vibes more than being super duper accurate. And I hope that resonates with people, especially with Daniel and his currently extremely sad boy vibes.
Yeah, so I do also have to ask, with you being the writer, the artist, the colorist, and the letterer, that's a lot of hats on a hat on a hat, and the fact that you are releasing about a couple times a week, what's that schedule like?
Yeah, so I am very fortunate that I basically gave myself a giant buffer of pages. So I probably had like almost upwards of 30, nearing 40 pages done before the comic actually went public. And so the comic went public, I was like releasing those pages just to Patreon. So like my patrons have been reading the comic for over like 6 months more than the rest of the world. So I'm currently the pages that are releasing twice a week right now. Those are pages I completed back in May. So I hope to kind of stay ahead like that moving forward. If not, like you said, having all the hats, being the so like creator behind every single like part of the pipeline, I would follow behind really fast. I could not draw and letter 2 pages a week. if I ever run out of buffer.
Definitely. I think it also must be free for you as a creative to really not have those hard boundaries, because I think the only other person really involved is Mark Stacks as the
Hmm.
editor.
Yeah, and it's something Mark has mentioned to me sometimes. Like he'll see me. Mark Stack is another comics writer, incredible. He wrote some like YA superhero comics like Young Justice and The Relentless Lark, but he's also done like more like hearty drama stuff, Scent of May Rain. But anyway, he is my editor, but he's my editor in the sense that he gives me story and plot and script feedback, and he doesn't touch like my page layouts or my lettering. So if anything ever reads really weird, it's not Mark's fault. That's all me. But he made a comment sometimes where he'll see me like I'll just go and add in a bunch of pages or I'll add in a bunch of silent panels, and he'll be like, "Man, I'm so jealous. That's really cool that you're able to do that," because he as a writer can't do that because that means more page rate out of his own pocket, and he's only got limited funds. So I feel like that is one of the benefits to just being the only person on this project, is that when I want to go add in 3 panels of like silence, I can do that.
Yeah, then you're also to blame when you decide to add in the horse. Well, that's the same about Chicago. There's no horses. You're fine. So, what has been kind of the most challenging aspect of doing a webcomic?
Well, I feel like it's a whole new world for me because I really didn't um I wasn't really involved in webcomics until I started keeping time. Like I knew webcomics were a thing when I was in high school. Like that was the golden era of the like strip webcomics, like Penny Arcade, and um so I knew they were a thing. I had never had any like drive to make one myself. Um during college I read like one drama webcomic called Anders Loves Maria, and that kind of like expanded my idea of what webcomics were, because that's just really like it's just a straight up drama. It wasn't a gag strip or whatsoever. Um but again, still I was just like, "Oh, that's cool. That's cool people are doing that." Didn't think anything of it. And then when I wanted to get into comics myself, webcomics weren't even on my radar. Like my goal was like direct market. I want to get to the big two. That's what I gotta do. That's where I'm going. Um, and that was me up until 2 years ago. uh, and I kind of fell into webcomics accidentally because once I realized I wanted to do my own solo project, the means of publishing for me were either like, okay, this isn't a direct market book, like it's not going to be like a monthly title, like it wouldn't do well there. So it's either going to be Tradpub or DIY YOLO. And like I did consider doing the traditional publishing, trying to sell it to like Penguin Random House or like the book market. My agent would have supported me if I had went that way, but ultimately I decided like, oh, I've seen some of the editorial changes other peers and friends of mine have had to their graphic novels just because of the way publishing demands and the market demands. And like no shade on them for making those changes. Like you got to do what you got to do. But it was like I don't know if I want that for me so much. So the idea of just completely freewheeling it, having no one to be accountable to but myself, is how I ended up in webcomics. And I find the challenge of it is probably the marketing aspect, trying to like convince people you should check this out, it's free.
Oh, definitely. I think that's also a really fast way to put the fact that you have to rely on yourself as that motivation, because it's basically you're running a marathon.
Yeah. Never ends. Like you promote one week and then your next week you got 2 more pages to post.
Mhm. So, what have you found to be how? Try to think best rephrase it. With writing in art and coloring and lettering, what have you found to be the most interesting aspect to take on by yourself?
Probably the lettering. Like I've never done lettering before. I've always been interested in it, but it's an entirely separate skill set. And a huge shout out to all the letterers out there making our books look amazing. Like, if I set up a panel weird where the first speaker's on the right or something, a letterer can save my ass, but now I'm the letterer, so I have to save my own ass. And sometimes I don't think I'm doing that. I think I'm just making it worse, but yeah, it's definitely like a whole new thing. Just the and also like being my own colorist on it, just, I'm if I make a mistake at any point in the pipeline, it's gonna carry on to the end. No one else can save me.
So aside from the technical aspects, let's talk a little bit more about story and characters, specifically with Denver and Daniel, which I will admit when I first read Keep in Time, I didn't realize it took place in Chicago. Whenever they said Denver, I'm like, Colorado? Is that where it is? And then I put the two together. It's just like, oh, okay. Denver is his name.
Denver's just his name. He's just named after a place. Eventually,
Exactly.
there's going to be some gags about how he's named after a state capital. One of my patrons commented that at some point, the character Elena should call him Sacramento, and I'm like, okay, that's going in.
Exactly. Every page is a new state capital, and
New
that's
state
just a joke.
capital. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about create those characters, create the story, this world, especially with the design of them as well.
Yeah, I think Denver and Daniel have been pretty much the same, aside for when they were stuffed animals and a Neopet, respectively. But the reason like Denver is a blonde guy is because the stuffed animal that he used to be was like a little fluffy blonde chow chow dog. But they've been pretty much the same ever since I've had them in middle school and high school. Uh, their personalities have remained the same, although like details about them have changed over the years, and a lot has changed for Keeping Time specifically as I like developed the big overarching plot that we're someday going to get to. But um yeah, I don't know if there's anything specific you'd like me to talk about with them, but
Yeah, let's
they
talk.
yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the slow burn, very slow burn romance because the character tabs on the website next to Denver is straight question mark. And then when you look at his mixtape, he has lip rest. I'm just like, hmm.
Yeah, as far as he's aware at this point of the comic, he's just a straight guy. He's never thought about it. He's never questioned it. Even when he was friends with Daniel in high school, and Daniel has always known that he's been queer, it never occurred to Denver to like self-investigate. And I feel like I kind of relate to that in a way because like there's been some things about myself that I've just like taken for granted until I like actually sat down. I was like, wait, no, maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think their relationship is so fascinating because there is that history there. We don't get a lot of it, but we can definitely infer in that regard. So you plan on exploring more about that
Yeah,
past.
so 100%. That is like the overarching theme. Like as we continue to move forward in time with the story, as Daniel rejoins the band, we're also going to be continuously moving backwards in time through events that have happened before the story starts. So we're going to keep going backwards. Um, like so far, we've just jumped backwards like a month or so to New Year's Eve and Christmas because the story starts. It starts around like late January, early February. So eventually we will get all the way back to high school. And I am extremely excited for that. And that probably won't happen for like 6 or 7 years at the rate that I am going.
It'll be worth it. So, are you a fan of slow burn romances?
I would say probably, but like the only slow burn romances I've read, if I'm being honest, are like fanfics. So like when I see a fanfic that's like 200,000 words and like 40 chapters, I'm like, yes, that's the one I want to read.
I
But
count
like,
that.
yeah, I don't know, like that I've read or watched like an intentionally slow burn um other sort of media.
Yeah, but I do think that is the nice thing about creating your own story, your own webcomics, that you allow that pace to happen because it's not like you're worried about, especially with print comics, that threat of quote unquote cancellation or the publisher losing faith. The fact that you have that ability to really go as long as you need to tell that narrative.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head. Like exactly, like that is the best part about doing the webcomic route, because like if it were even a direct market book, like I'm sure I would have to condense so much. I couldn't like linger in moments. It would just kind of be like, okay, we got to get through this. So yeah, like I think it's a blessing and a curse. I'm sorry to my readers who will be waiting 7 years for this thing to finish, but yeah, I think ultimately being able to control the pace is going to be beneficial for the story in the long run.
Again, I think your Patreon could be fine because as long as it's done as well as it is. Currently, it's worth the wait. I think that's such a another interesting angle is the fact that you are literally keeping time with it. The fact that you're allowing that to slowly pace. I think that feels really refreshing as a reader, where so much of current media is just sped up so fast. You really don't allow anything to
Yeah,
grow.
like I feel that there's a thread there, right, with how new TV shows will get dropped. The entire season gets dropped because like the entertainment industry is like, "Oh, you guys want to binge? Let's binge it." But then it really like I feel like ultimately it's detrimental because you don't get that sustained conversation that you used to have with like once a week a new episode or once every 2 weeks a new episode, and I miss that. I like the slower pace. I think that's one of the things that if we do the big return, like let's return to that.
Well, that's so funny to mention that because when I talked with Fellhound, she also brought that up as well. Just especially with tied into a similar direction with queer stories and queer narratives are of so much of the time now. You get what one season of a TV show, a movie, or even like not even a full comic series. So can you talk a little bit about what that's been like as a queer creative?
Yeah, I feel like queer media, like these studios, they take a chance on it, but then because their metrics for what success is are so narrowly defined, the us as the queer audience, we don't get to find it in time. We don't get to interact with it in time, and so then it gets canceled, and it's just devastating. Um, I mean, I love that queer stories are being taken a chance on, especially with the upcoming administration changes, where this might be extremely more hostile and difficult. But yeah, I wish that queer stories got more grace and like room to breathe and chill and take its time.
Fully agree with that because it's just to me as a I hate using the word consumer. I hate using consume, but I think as a consumer, it's like you could tell when so many times creatives are forced to basically push everything ahead all of a sudden because they knew of cancellation or they know that there's not a chance to get a second season.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really harmful. And it's created this like mentality of like, all right, well, I'm not going to try a new show or I'm not going to try a new book because like it's just going to get canceled, so I don't want to get invested. And so it's like a self-defeating loop.
Mhm. Yeah. So I do have to ask about with creating these characters, do you feel really a lot of connection with them? Do any of them really reflect your own experiences or personality?
Yeah, I feel like they like we all put ourselves in our characters, but I do feel like Denver, Daniel, and Daniel's sister Alex are extremely personal to me because it's sort of like I took my gender and split it three ways, and those are what the characters are. Like Denver is sort of the gender I would aspire to. Like there's a part of me that really would love to be that if the cards worked out in reality. Daniel is more of the gender that I probably am, and then Alex is sort of the gender that I used to be, that I lived as, that protected me. And yeah, so in that sense, they're extremely personal, but they also have personality traits that I don't have. So some are like aspirational, some are like my own flaws, like magnified or approached from a different angle. Um, so I feel like of all the Keeping Time characters, they're the most personal, and then everyone else is sort of like more fun and just me being like, "Ooh, yeah, what if I have a guy who loves ska? Like, there's a part of me that loves ska, but I'm gonna make that his entire personality. I'll start there and I'll go outwards."
Most realistic thing ever.
Yeah.
The person obsessed with ska constantly talks about ska. I'm guessing they don't have a skateboard.
He does not. I At one point I was doing like a gag when I was doing the character designs. I was one of my metrics was, can this character do a kickflip? And the ska living character cannot do a kickflip.
So I think another interesting challenge that you probably faced with creating Keep Time with the fact that it's original story, it's original narrative. So what was that like with trying to market it and try to get people to read it?
I This is probably my like Achilles heel as a comics creator. Like I don't think I'm very good at marketing it. I really studied how other webcomic creators approached their marketing, like by Lacey, who does the webcomic Lives Within. Lacey is killer at marketing, incredible. She like I take my cues from Lacey. And another comics creator, Bob. Bob does Demon of the Underground and Into the Smoke, and they're also really really good at like marketing in the sense of like building a community that wants to read and interact with their stories. But it's hard. I'd never know how to phrase it. I don't know how to sell it. So you'll often see me when I'm like doing my Blue Sky promotional posts or on Tumblr. I'm just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. Like,
I
because
do.
yeah, it's hard.
It
It's like,
does.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but I do think it does stick because I think you really have reached like a good audience with your work.
Yeah, I do feel very fortunate, and I think a lot of that was just plain luck. Because back on Twitter, I was able to like garner interest for Keeping Time before Keeping Time was even a thing. Because I was just in on the downside or in the downtime of my comics work, I was like, oh, I haven't thought about these characters, Denver and Daniel, in a long time. Like, I used to draw them. I'll try drawing them, and so I was doing these like just one-off illustrations from like their story. Um, and posting it on Twitter, and like those gained a really strong reaction. I was very fortunate. Like people really liked it. It made people interested in the characters before they knew who they were. And so I think Keeping Time was able to launch like on really good footing from people like that who are interested in it before it was a comic.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a really good way of getting people interested because you're almost I don't want to say subliminally, but you are kind of like putting the seeds in the ground and letting it grow by really getting these people interested in it. Because I think a lot of times with webcomics, the hardest part is getting the people invested or interested in the idea. Because if you're not promoting it ahead of time, then it's kind of like, well, what is this? Why should I read this?
Yeah, and it's a shame because like it's hard to get people to read webcomics, but I think it's one of the coolest like mediums out there right now. As I've gotten like more and more into webcomics, and I've met more webcomic creators and started reading more on my own, like people are doing such cool shit. Like
Mhm.
it's it's really webcomics remind me a lot of the early internet. Before we all got homogenized and like kind of like corralled onto social media sites like MySpace or Facebook, like early Facebook. when everyone was still just kind of making their own like GeoCities and like here's like a shrine to an anime that I like and here's just random shit that I think is cool. Like that era of the internet, this is very much webcomics. Like people were just out there taking wild swings and it rules.
Yeah, and I think another positive of webcomics is the fact that you don't need to rely on traditional physical stores to quote unquote sell it. The fact that because of the internet you can really attract such a wider, more niche audience that would fit better with your work compared to go with the more traditional distribution with comic stores with floppies and singles.
Yeah, that's a really like I hadn't quite like put that thought together, but that's an excellent point. Like if a webcomic gets made into print, then it sells because people like the webcomic. It's kind of the opposite route of I'm making this book with the goal of it being able to sell in a physical store because that's the only avenue to me. It's totally yeah, it's really cool and like it's very like inspiring to see other webcomics have such success with print runs like Lore Olympus and Covenant by Lysandra Vuong. That was definitely an inspiration to me. I was like, okay, well maybe a webcomic route will be cool because maybe if I'll be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think also too comics as a medium has changed so much because of webcomics. Because I know in the past, quote unquote, making it was working for Marvel or DC. Then you had Boom Image come in to really introduce the idea of quote unquote creator owned, and now because of the internet, you can really do that by yourself. Because essentially, you are hosting the comic on your own platform on your own website compared to something like God, I can't think of the webcomic site. It's killed me.
Webtoons
Yeah,
or top
compared to
yeah.
webtoons or tapas.
hmm Yeah, it really gives me freedom because then like I get to control the whole site, which I've gotten really into. I I love like making the site and coding it and like doing quality of life updates for the readers. So like if you click on a comic page now, you can like expand it. Little things like that. I'm like, yeah, this is fun, and it's nice to be in control of it. Like I don't have to I don't have to censor it to make sure that it's okay to upload to a platform like Webtoons or Tapas, which is a thing like I eventually want to do. I would like to mirror keeping time there, but I've been putting it off because of the censorship stuff. It's just like I don't. The rules are kind of they're strict, but they're vague, and it's like I don't know. I'll figure it out someday.
It's very punk rock.
Yeah, I'd like the punk rock attitude of webcomics and hosting your own shit.
Yeah. So with Keep Time running for it's almost close to a year at this point.
Yeah, that's wild. Started back in April and it's already November.
Yeah. So what has been kind of like with your past workflow structure? What improvements have you made, or what has been kind of challenged with the responses and all that, and try to up the quality?
I feel like my workflow now is I'm reaching the point where I think I've got it nailed down. Like when I was the artist for other folks' comics, the workflow is kind of defined by getting the feedback at stages in the pipeline. Like, you do your thumbnails, you send it to the writer or the editor, and they send it back with notes, and then you do the pensos, and maybe you send it back at that point. But since, I don't have anyone, again, Mark doesn't sign off on layouts. So all layout issues are my own. I now work in batches of pages. So like anywhere between 4 and currently I'm doing a 10-page batch, which I'm never going to do again. But so I'll like everything is scripted and everything is thumbed, but I'll do everything on these batch of pages from start to finish. So pencil all the pages, ink all the pages, flat all the pages, color it, letter it, and then upload it to Patreon. And yeah, I've never worked like this before, but I feel like I'm finally kind of getting into the groove of it, except when I'm doing like really background intensive pages, my brain doesn't really want to focus, and that's kind of where I've been. I keep doing accidental like pomodoro method, where I'm doing work for 15 minutes and then I'm like, okay, I'm bored, take a break, I gotta, and I'll just like poop around on the internet for 15 minutes, and it's not great.
Wow, that is quite the workflow. So, can you talk a little bit about the art design, the art direction, the actual physical drawing, and also with the coloring about the creative aspect and also the technical aspect for the programs that you use?
Yeah, I'm a huge Clip Studio Paint user. That's pretty much what I work in. I also have taught myself Blender to use 3D assets for like reference for backgrounds, to the point where I I'm really bad at backgrounds. I'm really terrible at perspective, and I'm upfront about that. I think people know. So I've built these giant There's essentially Lego sets. I mean, they're not actual Legos, but they're like that in Blender, of every single setting that I need to draw. Um, so that's how I do my backgrounds. So I'm like Clip Studio Paint, Blender, and then Photoshop for an Illustrator for the lettering, which I would love to get away from Adobe someday, but it's just the alternatives to Illustrator for lettering aren't quite where I want them to be. So I'm stuck using those.
That is really cool, the fact that you are using Blender for backgrounds, because I've definitely noticed that's a lot more common for artists now to really talk a lot about making 3D models of the environments, really keep track of where everything is for continuity, space, all that.
Yeah, 100%. Like I could not be making this comic if I didn't have sort of those shortcuts, you know. But I mean, it was hours and hours of assembling these Blender sets and like designing their rooms. So you can like plop yourself down in Blender in like Denver's apartment or in the piano bar and like move the camera around and see everything. So, and it's like I put everything there. I hand sculpted some things. It's work, but in like preparation work, and now I'm reaping the benefits. And like for example, I modeled the dirt bikes for Fel in Fel's comic Sir, which people should definitely check out. Seismic Iron Clash Roulette. That's out with Boom Studios. It's wrapping up soon, but it's lesbian motorcycle jousting. Check it out. It's a great time. But yeah, like I when Fel told me what she was doing and that it was motorcycle jousting, and it's like, Fel, you're gonna be drawing these dirt bikes over and over and over again. Are you okay? Like, like this decision that you've made, are you good? But yeah, so it was great to be able to help Fel out with that.
Mhm.
So I think Fel just plops down the motorcycle in Clip Studio Paint and then like draws over it.
I don't believe that, because you're doing the work up front where it makes it easier. I don't. It doesn't make it easier. It makes it smooths out the process where you have that reference and you're
Yeah.
not worrying about trying to keep track of where everything is when you're on a deadline and all that.
Yeah, and like if I were to try to do backgrounds from scratch, like there's no way I would be on a 2 page a week update schedule with like 6 months ahead. I would be panicking, scrolling like, oh, this week's page is gonna be late. I'm so sorry. And I figure like it's nicer this way. Like I don't want to have to do too many like hiatuses or breaks for like readers who they want to tune in every week and read. I don't want to like ghost them for several months as I'm trying to catch up on my pages. So I'm gonna do my best to stay ahead with whatever shortcuts I can.
Oh, definitely. Can you talk a little bit about the artistic influences on Keeping Time?
Yeah, I mentioned Cab and Utown. Cab's a huge inspiration with backgrounds. I also like prior to Keeping Time, I wouldn't say I was very like confident or interested in inking. Like I mostly approached art from sort of a painter's perspective, and even like my older comic work, it was me like still using painter brain, so lines weren't really important, like volumes through color were. Um and that changed for Keeping Time because it's like this doesn't look good like on a page. It just doesn't. like it looks fine for illustration, but it doesn't look good when it's a whole comic page that you have to look at as a unit, especially in relation to other comic pages around it. So I sort of switched styles, got more line art heavy, and I think like great inkers like Ice Ghost, aka Bailey Underwood, and Ted Brant of Steinstein. They're great. Um, so inkers like that have influenced me in my approach to art now, and I would say the main artistic and creative influence on Keeping Time is a manga creator named Ayazawa. I've talked about her a little bit before in other places, but she did the manga called Paradise Kiss, which is like the formative story of my teenage years. And Paradise Kiss, it follows like when you read it, it's so tightly paced. It breathes when it needs to breathe. It moves when it needs to move. But Ayazawa does these really incredible emotive reaction panels where a character is just reacting to information that they've just received in a way that like you really feel it as a reader. And I so at this point in my script writing, Mark went and picked up Paradise Kiss to better understand me. So at this point in my script, sometimes I'll just write panel 3 Yazawa panel, and it's just like the character. I'm just gonna do a reaction shot like Ayazawa.
Yeah, no, and I do enjoy the fact that you're mentioning so much about manga impacting you because I think for a while there was such a tendency to keep comics and manga separate, and I think especially with you, definitely with Fell, the fact that they're not different. They're just similar sides of. They're just this. They're just different sides of the same coin. It's like it's all comics. I think
Yeah.
there's now such a hunger for new stuff, especially with like keeping time.
Yeah, and like it's wild to see how manga and comics have like come closer together as times move on, because like when I would have been graduating high school and going to college, I had dreams of going to art college, but that was at the height of art colleges do not want to see manga shit. Like they look down on it, like rub their nose at it, like they turn up their nose at it. And if you drew too anime or manga, you probably wouldn't get into the art college. So that is sort of the mentality that like I came up in, and like that's why I sort of stopped drawing, because it's like I wanted to draw anime and manga, but it got like hammered out of me by
Mm.
the sort of artistic culture of the time. And so it's Keeping Time is me sort of coming back to my anime roots. But I'm like I was just thinking, like, I see in webcomics and regular comics these days these motion lines that have been borrowed from manga. It's really cool, and like manga conventions like a bubble coming out of someone's nose when they're sleeping or something like that'll show up in Western comics sometimes, and it's like really cool to see that sort of like bleeding through. I think it's great.
Yeah, no, too. I think it's just a good thing where they. I do think it's a good thing where we don't need to show hostility toward this different style. The fact that they're not competing with each other. They're both in conversation is how I kind of view it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. In conversation with each other. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. So again, it still feels weird calling Keep in Time a period comic because the 2000s were not that long ago. That was like
Right. To me, it's like that meme where it's like, yeah, 2001 was like 10 years ago, and the 80s were 20 years ago. But
exactly.
yeah, and there was like a full 20 years ago at this point.
Yeah,
I like leaned into the bit and I call it like, yeah, my ancient historical drama.
yeah. No, it's funny. Well, it's funny for me because I think it was like probably grade school in the 2000s. So it's kind of like, huh. I kind of remember this. I was a bit too young, but I
Yeah.
kind of remember stuff like that. So what is kind of like a trend that you feel that needs to come back from the 2000s?
Oh man, I think my answer's got to be tactile buttons. Like I'm kind of sick of flat touch screens. Like I want buttons that
Yes.
go down that depress when I push them. I think that's what I want.
That's a mood because there's nothing worse than just smartphones. And that's like, I should be feeling a response whenever I text or use
Yes,
the
yeah, I
buttons.
want that tactile feedback. Like sometimes I see car commercials and like their dashboards and like your gears are on the touch screen, and I'm just like, I
I,
don't like that. I don't. I want
yeah,
I want something very tactile to let me know that I just put my car in reverse.
yeah, it's like I need to have the actual gear shift to move this. It just feels weird. It doesn't feel natural. It truly doesn't with that. But I do also have to ask whether you have on the website made a 2000s Flash game.
Yeah.
Will we be getting original music by chance?
Oh, so that is on my dream list, is to reach out to a band and have like collaborate with them on a song that would be by the band in Keeping Time Tennyson. But the band that I reached out to that I shot my shot with never got back to me.
Oh no.
But every time I go to a show, a music show, and there's an opener that I don't know before, I have the thought of like, oh, if they're sick, like maybe I'll reach out to them. And it just happened to me because I was just at a concert on Tuesday, and the opener was a local band in Seattle, and I was like, hmm. But yeah, that would be a dream. I just got to find the right band and have that band check their emails.
Mhm. So, out of all the characters, which one do you feel the closest to when it comes to music taste?
Oh god, that's really hard. Denver really likes hardcore punk, which I enjoy live, but it's not something that I'll seek out to listen to like in my headset. Daniel is probably and like Tomas, the ska lover. Like I love ska, but I wouldn't be able to listen to ska as much as like Tomas would. Um, I really like hip hop, and that's where Steph comes in. And I don't really like metal. Like just like I just don't haven't found too much metal that I super vibe with, so I'm not much like Steph. So it'd probably be Daniel, because I really liked the post punk revival, which was like Franz Ferdinand, Interpol, and The Strokes. Um, and I gave Daniel my opinion that the post punk revival ended too soon.
It did. It did with that, and that's so funny. You're talking to a big punk metal fan. Like I have so much that stuff on vinyl, but yeah, I think that is a good observation that the post punk revival ended too soon. I truly think we should. Do you watch Dropout by chance?
I do not, but someone has mentioned it to me recently, so it's been on my radar.
So there's a show on it called Smarty Pants where they basically do PowerPoint parties and all that where they discuss topic. One of the dropout people does what about why swing music needs to come back, and that's kind of how it is with post punk. It's like we need to bring that back. That will save us.
Bring it back.
Come back, France. We need you. We miss you with that.
Where did you go? You left us too soon. But yeah, no, it's super funny because like the band that I just saw open, I went to a Hotel Mirror show. They're originally from British Columbia. I think they're based out of LA now, indie rock. And the band that opened for them was Public Theater, which I didn't know was here in Seattle, and I also didn't know they were going to be the openers. So when they came on stage, I was like, oh shit, awesome. But I was just on their website because they mentioned they're from Seattle, and that was the band. I was like, ah. But they mentioned that they are influenced by like the post punk revival, and I was like, no wonder I like you guys so much.
Mhm.
But yeah, post punk revival, it felt like it only went on for like 6 years, if that, and then we instantly went into like, I don't know what you call it, like the stomp and clap folk rock Mumford and Sons
Oh, God.
era, and that also ended really soon. Like whether you liked it or not, it was like it felt like it was around for a while, but when I think about it, it was like 3-4 years.
God, I was the perfect age because I think it was like in middle school and high school when that came in. It was like the perfect age to be brainwashed
By the
by that
stomp and
stuff.
clap.
Exactly. It's like it's so cool. Do you not get this? They have suspenders.
Yeah, no,
It's
I was right there with you. I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And then I got sick of it.
Exactly. But another really cool thing that I find about Keep Times for that set in Chicago, which you mentioned you've never been there or lived there, and what was kind of your decision to go with that?
Yeah, so I've never lived in Chicago. I feel like um at this point, if I were to live anywhere other than Seattle, it would be Chicago, because I was fortunate enough to visit it once for just shy of a week, to go watch some wrestling.
Oh, nice.
But I like instantly fell in love with it. Like I thought it was a great city. I had never really thought I wanted to explore the Midwest very much. Like as a kid growing up in Hawaii, like you think about, yeah, I want to go to the West Coast and I want to go to the East Coast, and everything in between is maybe not on your radar as much.
Hmm.
But yeah, Chicago blew me away. I really liked it. My big Chicago takeaway is I like that Chicago is a really friendly city to just sit in. They have a lot of infrastructure that encourages you to just have a seat, which I think more cities should do.
That's not a hot take. That is a correct take. Surely, walkable cities make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I think it worked out because like um although Keeping Time isn't totally about Midwestern emo, that's a very like adjacent vibe to the guy's music taste in the comic. And so setting it in the Midwest, being influenced by Chicago, I think it really worked out. And then at the time, my friend Frankie White, who is another comics writer and editor, was able to like give me some feedback about setting it in Chicago, so it just helped to ground it and make it more real. So I do spend a lot of time on Google Street View in Chicago to get the vibe right, if not the exact architecture.
What's the biggest thing that you've learned that you got incorrect about Chicago?
I haven't yet to make a faux pas, but it's very there is pressure because I learned recently that my webcomic analytics uh shows me my readership by city, and the U.S. city from which I have the most readers is Chicago, and it's just like, oh no, the pressure is on. But I haven't gotten anything too bad yet, and I hope I never do. But I got really granular with like looking at Chicago's Department of Transportation's website that has a manual on what the legal allowances of sidewalks are supposed to be, so that when I was building my Lego sets, the sidewalks could be the correct width.
I'm just amazed that you're doing all this minute detail. It's one of those things too where
No one's gonna notice.
exactly, except for you, you will notice, you'll care, and I
Yeah.
think that really shows in the comic.
Thank you. Yeah, there's some things that I am like, my executive function is like, nope, we gotta get this thing right. And then there's other things where I'm like, that shoulder looks enough like a shoulder. It's fine. We're rolling.
So start wrapping things up.
Mhm.
What can people expect about in the future for Keep It Time?
I think if you're reading it now, you're gonna enjoy as the band finally comes together, and we kind of see the band's dynamic once the band is complete, and how that trajectory influences the relationship of the two main characters, and how it'll eventually lead to romance. And at the same time, we'll also learn why they had a huge falling out in the first place. Yeah.
Great. Love to hear all that drama that's going to be coming with that. So, Cody, how can people follow you? How can they support you in your work?
Oh, I am mostly on Blue Sky these days, which is great. I think everyone should join Blue Sky. I am kodyisover.com on Blue Sky, because you can set your domain as your like handle, so you can find me there. And on other social media, I'm usually at Kody is over, and that's Kody with a K. And Keeping Time, you can read at keepingtimecomic.com.
And also, you can sign up for the Patreon.
Yeah, you sure can.
That's.
Please subsidize my comic.
I mean, for the amount of money for each month, it's definitely worth it because it's like it's more pages than what a traditional comic than what you would get a traditional 22-page comic. and
Mm.
cheaper compared to that as well.
That's a fantastic point. I think maybe you should be in charge of my marketing.
Well, thank you so much, Cody, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Brent.